Hi everyone, Shaunee Brannan here, back with another YouTube video for the month of February 2023. Yes, we're already halfway through February, moving towards March, and I have some things that I want to talk about this month. But before I get into all of that, as always, I'm going to ask you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm going to ask you to subscribe to my blog, which is www.shauneebrannan.com. www.prayersandpunchlines.com, and this channel is actually an extension of my blog where I talk about everything from faith, family, fashion, and fun, but this channel is where I really focus on the spiritual things and the character things, the personality things, all of those things that are internal is what this channel is all about. And so listen, I don't know how you got here. Maybe you saw my link on social media. Maybe someone sent it to you, but either way, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're going to listen, because today we're going to revisit the topic of insecurity. And I say revisit because in 2017, I wrote a book called High Insecurity by Insecurity, and I released the book, and I didn't put as much push or attention behind it as I did my other books, because I really wrote the book almost as what I didn't realize then was therapy. God was pushing me to release some things, but I did it out of obedience, and I really shared my heart. And it really had such a great impact on a lot of people, but I didn't really put the push behind it. And that's not necessarily what I'm doing now. This isn't about a plug, but this is about 6 years later, re-emphasizing some things and kind of adding to it, because I've lived more life and I've seen more things, and I've mentored more people and prayed for more people and walked alongside more people, and also have gone through a lot of different things myself since releasing the book that kind of brings light, even more light, to the topic of insecurity. And so there's some things I'm going to revisit in the book today, but just kind of adding to and maybe even taking away from, because any teacher or anyone that feels like they're an expert in something lives a little bit more and finds out that they're not, and finds out that they were wrong in some areas, and finds out that they missed some things and that there was more to learn. And so I want you to just go on a journey with me. Let me just say that the topic of insecurity is very broad. It's lengthy. I can talk about it a very long time, but I'm going to touch some points today, and then I'll come back later and add to it. If you're not following me on social media, please follow me on social media, because I do little bites and pieces dealing with the topic. And let me tell you something. If you're sitting there and you're saying, this doesn't apply to me, I'm not insecure, I'm the most confident person I know, you've already removed yourself from the possibility of targeting areas, because we all have insecurities, and some of us have just gotten a lot better with masking them and hiding them and dealing with them, which is why the book says High Insecurity by Insecurity, because it's all about unearthing and discovering the presence of insecurity in our lives and saying goodbye to it. But you got to discover it, because it hides under, and it usually starts when we're children and we go our whole lives using the same mechanisms or even better mechanisms to suppress it, but it's still there working. And so I want to say this before I even get into some of the things that are in the book and some of the ways that insecurity is present or hides. I want to say that insecurity is just a layer. It is a layer that is a part of the peeling of this big onion, where the root of the onion is identity. So insecurity is one layer that is the result of identity. When your identity is strengthened and rooted in the right thing, which I talk about in the book, insecurity is less prevalent. And when it shows up, you know how to deal with it. But when your identity is not secure and rooted in the right thing and coming from the right place, insecurity is so prevalent. When identity is rooted in the right thing. When insecurities come up, you know how to deal with them because there's something so strong anchoring you. And as a believer, and let me say, I have to say this again, this channel is, I don't want to say it's directed at believers, but a lot of hard truths that I present are under the responsibility of being a believer and a disciple. And so there's things I'm going to say where I am assuming that I'm talking to believers and talking to people that love the Lord and talking to people that want to be disciples of Jesus Christ. Listen, if you're a non-believer, if you're saying I'm not a Christian, these things still apply to you. But let me say something. The thing that anchors me and where I get my strength from is my relationship with the Lord. Anything that I say on the topic of insecurity is not me talking from a place of pride. It's me talking from a place of being a student who has been processed. My testimony, I talk about it in the book and I talk about it all the time. I was highly, 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 highly insecure. And I was very, 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 very good at hiding it, suppressing it, using all of these things to supplement the holes in my life. And one day at my lowest point, because we all have them, I want to say my lowest points with an S. It was in that time that I was really introduced to the love of God. And listen, I've been a believer. I was born and raised in the church. So it's not like, oh, she was lost and she was found. No, I was found and then found again. All right. I was already under the umbrella of salvation and just highly insecure. I want to say, just because you go to church and you hear preaching and teaching and good church music does not mean you know yet what God says about you. And when God began to tell me who I was and show me how loved I was and how valued I was, He began to identify himself inside of me. And once that happened, it was like, it is so impossible to know who you really are in God and to know what God thinks and feels about you and then walk away and be jealous of someone else or want to be someone else. Like when he tells you, you feel like the most important, special person in the world and you only want what he said about you and what he said is for you. You don't walk away wanting to be someone else or wanting something that someone else has, because what he's revealed to you feels so much like yours that it is such a place of security. And so you don't walk away talking about other people and feeling like you have to tear them down to be anything special or want their life or envy them or any of those things, because you really know who you are. And when God began to show me who I was, I began to see how I'd lived not knowing who I was. And one of those ways were in my insecurities. Just a lot of the things that I was raised believing or thinking. Sometimes parents teach you the wrong things or they don't teach you enough of the right things. I have excellent parents. I love my mom and dad, but there was a lot of affirming and direction and identity that I needed outside of the things that I could do right. You know, sometimes as parents, we'll celebrate our kids when they only do the right things, but we don't celebrate them when they're trying or when they fail trying to build them up the right way. And so, listen, I don't want to rabbit trail and go too far off, but if you get the book, if you go watch some of my other videos, you'll hear the reasons why my insecurities were prevalent. And for a lot of us, it starts when we're young. It starts from the things that are said about us or not said about us, or said to us or not said to us, or environments that we're raised in. And those insecurities start to mount and they start to build. And so for myself, what I notice now is when you have dealt with something and you deal with it and you beat it, you kind of become an expert at spotting it. And you add to that a sensitivity to God and to a spirit. He'll show you, like he'll reveal to you, like, yeah, they're saying this, but this is really what it is. And one of the ways I'm going to get into, let me just say this. I don't want to go off. I am in what chapter of the book is this? This is chapter 4 of the book, where we talk about symptoms and coping mechanisms. And I'm going to start with this chapter because I'm really trying to help you see if it's a presence in your life. And you may be saying, girl, I don't need to see. I came on here because I'm insecure and I already know it. And I want to say this: every last single person you know, including myself, has something that they're insecure about or something that they have to stay in line and constantly be affirmed to fend off an insecurity. We all have insecurities. Just because I wrote a book, just because I talk, preach, and teach about insecurity and identity does not mean that I do not have things that I actively work on. Sometimes you'll beat it in one season and it's good and gone. And then it'll pop back up in another season where you're starting to feel insecure and question yourself and are unsure of yourself. These things come up, they resurface. And so if your question is, do I ever just fully beat it where it goes away forever? The answer is no. But you become so sound and sure in who God has made you that you just deal with it so much easier. You're able to hear his voice a lot easier, where he's giving you direction in areas that you may seem unsure in or not quite secure. And it's like it's easily nipped. It's not something that becomes a part of your personality as opposed to something that is in the moment, something that is temporary. And so here are some of the symptoms of insecurity. All right. Fear, anxiety, emotional unrest, envy, jealousy, constant comparison, cynicism, distrust, manipulation, control, pride, vanity, and snobbery. I don't know if snobbery is a word. I put it in here though, and we're going to say it today. Snobbery. Bragging and habitual self-praise, arrogance, defensiveness, offensiveness, self-loathing, self-righteousness, selfishness, anger, stubbornness, rebellion, and I want to say, and all such like, because I'm sure there's some that I missed. Oh, lying and aggression. That's on the next page. And so these are some of the ways that insecurity shows up. And I am just kind of glancing and kind of going over different things in the book. But here are some of the personality traits of coping mechanisms for insecurity. Control freaks, the introvert. And I really want to stop here with the introvert because I know somebody is saying, well, I'm introvert and I have social anxiety. The reason that I brought up an introvert is because I myself am part introvert. I'm more introvert than I am extrovert. And I think sometimes when people meet me, I can throw them off because I seem so outgoing in these videos and I seem outgoing on social media. And I am outgoing, but I'm reserved. And I'm more to myself than some may expect or even realize. But here's the thing with people that are chronically introvert in a way that is insecure. A lot of times they go into themselves and they don't want to be around other people and they don't want the company of other people because they are working so hard to cover things that they either don't like about themselves or feel like other people will not like or understand. And so it's easier just to be alone. It's easier not to talk or have conversation because you are working very hard to conceal things that you feel like other people do not need access to. And so when you're introverted because of insecurities, there's usually a high level of unrest, anxiousness. There is no peace when you're in the presence of other people that you're not really comfortable with, that you don't know. It's possible to be introvert and be in the presence of other people that you don't really know or not necessarily comfortable with, but you have peace within yourself. And when there's an unrest and discomfort and just very hard to have conversation because of the turmoil that's going on inside. It's usually an insecurity that's present. If you listen to your thoughts, you will hear thoughts that scream insecurity. And so being introvert because of insecurity, there is a lack of peace inside. You may not be saying a word, you may not be interacting with someone, but there is a great lack of peace inside. The next one is competitive, being very competitive, the comparer, the narcissist, someone that's proud and arrogant, the people pleaser, the overachiever, the constant comic. And I want to say this about the constant comic because I am very comedic and I love a sense of humor. I believe that God has a sense of humor, that He gave it to all of us. But sometimes when we're kind of the opposite of an introvert when you're being the constant comic, is you feel like if you have everybody laughing and if you have everyone talking, then no one has enough time to stop and look at the things you're trying to cover. It's like the reverse. So where the introvert goes into themselves and they're quiet and they don't want to be around people, the constant comic is not necessarily an extrovert, but they're the ones that if I'm funny, and if I have everyone laughing, and if I have everyone not paying attention to these things that I'm working to cover, they won't see them. So we got to be funny. We got to be the center of attention in that way so that we're not the center of attention in another way. Then you have the hater, the gossip, and the fault finder. And listen, I'm going to come back there and I'll probably end there because it's kind of what sparked this. The self-righteous, the vain and materialistic, and the deceitful and the liar, the violent and the tough guy, the racist and the prejudice. I think that was the last one. But I want to come back to the hater, gossip, and fault finder. And listen, you guys will have to tell me in the comments. You'll have to message me through social media. You can go to my website and message me through the contact and tell me if any of those other ones that I mentioned is something that you want me to highlight in another video or reference on social media. But the reason I want to stop here is because I have dealt with and I see a great deal of projection. When I talk about the hater, the gossip, and the fault finder, listen, as a woman, you deal with it. You were it at one point. God forbid. I hope somebody can say I never was. But when you're insecure and you really are not happy with yourself or not sure of what God has spoken over you or what God's intentions are for you, you find yourself hating, you find yourself gossiping, and you find yourself fault finding. And ultimately, it's projection. Because no one sits around and says negative things about someone that's not doing something, that's someone that's not going somewhere, someone that's not being complimented and praised. And listen, I've done it and I've had it done to me. So when I'm sitting here talking about it, I'm talking about it as an expert on both sides of the coin. I have sat there and talked about people and torn people down for having 2 times the confidence that I wish that I had, or going after things that I did not have the belief in myself to go after, or even people who I admired and I thought well of, but I just really didn't have it in me to say that. So instead, I would take away from them and try to fault find and tear them down in my mind to bring them down to a level where I felt like we were equal or that they were less than me, because I was really trying to find a way to feel good about myself. And this is the thing. I want you to ask yourself, when is the last time that you've just complimented somebody? I'm not talking about your friends or your family. I'm talking about complimenting someone who you admire, someone who you may not know, or someone who's not your friend. Because we're good at complimenting our friends because we feel like at some level we can benefit from the things we're complimenting, or take advantage of the things that we're complimenting, and we don't always know how to just celebrate someone that we can't necessarily directly benefit from whatever it is that they possess. And I want you to ask yourself, when is the last time that you've just genuinely complimented someone, or spoken well of someone when they weren't around, or have prayed for someone who you admire or who you believe possess the capability to be something great? Let me say this too, and I know that this may ruffle some feathers, but that's what I'm here for. I'm here to ruffle a little bit of feathers because I want you to be able to look within. I, as a woman of color who have plenty of women of color in my family, who pastor women of color, who are constantly around women of color, let me just say that complimenting one another comes a little bit less easy to women of color than it does women of other cultures. And I don't want to even just say women of color. I want to say people that have been oppressed. People that have been oppressed or who have grown up in oppression have a harder time celebrating and speaking well of others because there is a mindset that has been passed down from generation to generation. I have found that, and I'm just going to say it, that women of other cultures, white women, even the Asian community, they tend to compliment so much easier, especially women of color. I've worked with all nationalities, and I have had women of other nationalities sit and just say, "You are so beautiful," and they will praise you without a jealous bone in their body. Now, I know someone's sitting there saying, "Yeah, but they do other things." Don't forget the Karens, and don't forget the people that are prejudiced. And listen, I already know. I've had my fair share of racist encounters. I already know. But I'm talking about them looking you in the eye and saying, "You're beautiful. Your children are beautiful. Oh, you're so pretty. Oh, I love your shoes." Like without any hate, or any sense of jealousy. And usually it's because they've been raised in an environment or generationally passed down wealth, opportunity. They aren't really fighting over mates. They have a nice, healthy supply of men, available bachelors. And so they aren't really threatened by scarcity. So they have no issue celebrating you, complimenting you, saying good things about you because they were not raised in oppression. When I deal with Black women that are the same way, it's usually the same way. They have not succumbed to oppression. Even if they were raised in it, they rise above it, they're secure, they have no problem complimenting you whatsoever. But for some reason, in minorities, in environments where you were raised in oppression, it is very hard to look at someone doing well and say you're doing well, or celebrate them, or compliment them. And when I say, when is the last time you've complimented someone? Listen, I compliment people all the time. Now, before I knew who I was, you wasn't getting no compliment out of me. I was going to find something negative. If I loved your shoes, I was going to look at your shoes and say to myself, "Them some nice shoes." But her feet is busting out the sides and it's ugly. Listen, hard to give people compliments. But when there's a level of security, you can look at something admirable and say it's admirable and say it's great without taking away. The way that we tear down celebrities and tear down people that have accomplished something. And listen, I know that with the tabloids and with the shade room and with gossip columnists and with social media, we tend to feel like it's okay to say things and tear people down and make comments and stuff like that because we feel like it come with the territory. If you're going to be famous, you got to be able to take criticism and you should be able to hear what we say. But the reality is, We're talking about them because they've accomplished something. And we're talking about them because they've done something that we look at and we admire. And it is so difficult for us to look at people with wealth or who have achieved things and just say they're great. And this is the truth. You are attracting the very thing that you respect. So if you want to tear down, y'all, I don't know if y'all can hear my family. Like, they're flushing toilets. The dog is barking. My husband's down here talking. The kids have followed them. I don't know if you can hear them, but we're close to the end of the video anyway. But the reality is, we don't sit around and talk about people that aren't great and that have not accomplished something and that are not working towards something. And so I want to say this as I wrap up the video, because I feel intrusion coming soon into this room. I do want to say that you need to be mindful of the things that are within your heart and searching out the places of insecurity, but don't try to do it apart from identity. And don't try to get identity apart from Christ, because ultimately he's waiting to tell you all of the things he thinks about you, how much he loves you, all of the value that he has for you. Once you find out what he says about you, then you and him together can go and find these hidden areas of insecurity, and he will deal with every last single one, because that's how good he is. I love y'all. Thank y'all for watching. I'm sorry about the noise if you hear it, but listen, we're going to pick back up next month. In the meantime, follow me on social media. Please subscribe to my blog and to my channel, and I'll see you guys soon.